What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest action stars walks into what should be a friendly late-night interview, only to face a host who seems determined to tear him down piece by piece? Tonight we're diving into the explosive confrontation that left Arnold Schwarzenegger storming off Jimmy Kimmel's set. And trust me, you won't believe how nasty this got. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story has more twists than a Terminator plot. The atmosphere in the Jimmy Kimmel live studio was already tense before Arnold even sat down. Behind the scenes, crew members had noticed Kimmel pacing more than usual, muttering to himself as he reviewed his cards. Something was different about his demeanor that night, an edge that regular viewers might not have picked up on immediately, but Arnold certainly did the moment he walked onto that stage. As the Austrian oak settled into the guest chair, flashing his trademark smile to the audience, Kimmel's opening was already loaded with what seemed like innocent jabs. "So Arnold, I have to ask, at your age, are you still trying to convince people you're relevant in Hollywood? Or have you finally accepted that your best days are behind you?" The audience let out an uncomfortable laugh, the kind that happens when a joke crosses a line, but people aren't quite sure how to react. Arnold's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning, but anyone watching closely could see the shift in his eyes. "Jimmy, I think you might be confusing me with someone else. Last I checked, my projects are still breaking box office records and my businesses are thriving. Maybe you should focus on your own ratings before questioning mine." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Kimmel's response came quick and sharp. "Oh, so we're going there already? I thought we'd at least get through the pleasantries before you started getting defensive. But hey, if you want to talk about ratings, let's talk about how your last 3 movies barely made back their budget." What followed was a masterclass in passive-aggressive television warfare. Arnold, ever the professional, attempted to steer the conversation toward his actual projects, his environmental initiatives, and his ongoing work in public service. But Kimmel seemed determined to undermine every single thing the former governor tried to discuss. "Your environmental work," Kimmel interrupted with a smirk. "Isn't that a bit hypocritical coming from someone who used to drive Hummers everywhere? I mean, talk about a convenient transformation. What's next? Are you going to tell us you've always been a vegetarian?" The audience was starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that this wasn't the usual playful banter they were accustomed to seeing on late-night television. Arnold's jaw tightened visibly. "Jimmy, I've been very open about my past and how my views have evolved. Growth and change are part of being human. Perhaps you should try it sometime instead of sitting here throwing cheap shots at your guests." His accent became more pronounced. As his frustration grew, a tell that anyone familiar with Schwarzenegger interviews would recognize immediately. But Kimmel wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed energized by Arnold's visible irritation. "Cheap shots? I'm just asking the questions that everyone else is thinking. Like, how does someone go from action star to politician and then back to whatever it is you're doing now? It seems like you just jump from one attention-seeking venture to another." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Arnold leaned forward in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests tightly enough that his knuckles turned white. "Attention-seeking? Jimmy, I've built businesses, served my state, and contributed more to society than most people could dream of. What exactly have you contributed besides making jokes about people who are actually out there making a difference?" Kimmel's laugh was cold and calculated. "There it is, the ego we all know and love. You know what, Arnold? Maybe the problem isn't that people don't take you seriously anymore. Maybe the problem is that you never learned when to gracefully exit the spotlight." The studio audience was now completely silent, the usual supportive energy replaced by an awkward tension that seemed to press against everyone present. Even the camera operators seemed uncertain, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut away from what was clearly becoming something far more personal than professional. Arnold stood up slowly, his imposing frame casting a shadow across Kimmel's desk. "You know what, Jimmy? I came here tonight as a favor, thinking we could have an actual conversation. But I see now that you're more interested in trying to tear me down than having a real discussion. This isn't journalism, it's just cruelty, disguised as comedy. Kimmel's eyes gleamed with what looked almost like satisfaction. Oh, so now you're the victim? The big tough Terminator can't handle a few pointed questions? Maybe you should stick to scripts, Arnold, because improvisation clearly isn't your strong suit. Arnold's response came with the controlled fury of someone who had spent decades in both Hollywood boardrooms and political arenas, learning how to channel anger into precision strikes. You want to talk about improvisation, Jimmy? Let's talk about how you're improvising your way through this interview, because you clearly didn't do any actual preparation. You're just throwing around tabloid gossip and hoping something sticks. The host's face flushed red, but he pressed on with even more venom. Preparation? I prepared plenty. I prepared for the Arnold who used to matter, not whatever watered-down version is sitting in front of me now. Tell me, when was the last time you did something genuinely impressive that wasn't just trading on your past glory? Arnold's laugh was sharp and humorless. Jimmy, you're sitting there in your little late-night bubble, making jokes about people who actually go out and change the world. While you've been making the same tired jokes for years, I've been building green energy, companies, working on climate change initiatives, and actually making a difference. But sure, let's pretend your contribution to society is somehow more valuable. Kimmel leaned back in his chair, clearly relishing the confrontation. Climate change initiatives? You mean those photo ops where you stand next to solar panels and pretend to care about the environment? Come on, Arnold, we both know this is just another role for you. The concerned environmentalist, the reformed politician, the wise elder statesman. Which character are you playing today? The accusation hit differently than the previous jabs, and Arnold's composure finally began to crack in a more visible way. You think this is all an act? Jimmy, I've put millions of my own money into these causes. I've used my platform to bring attention to issues that matter. What have you done besides sit behind this desk and mock people who are actually trying to make a difference? Oh, here we go with the Saint Act, Kimmel shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Saint Arnold, the man who can do no wrong, the man who's evolved beyond all his past mistakes. Tell me, do you actually believe your own publicity, or is this just what you tell yourself to sleep at night? Arnold's hands were visibly shaking now, not from fear or nervousness, but from the effort of containing his rage. You know what your problem is, Jimmy? You've spent so long tearing other people down that you've forgotten what it's like to actually build something. You sit here every night, making jokes about people who are out there taking risks, making mistakes, learning, growing, and actually living their lives. Kimmel's smile turned predatory. And you've spent so long pretending to be something you're not, that you've lost track of who you actually are. The muscle-bound action star, the fumbling politician, the environmental crusader. Which one is the real Arnold? Or are they all just costumes you put on depending on what's popular at the moment? The words seemed to land like physical blows. Arnold stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward with the force of his movement. That's enough. I don't have to sit here and listen to this amateur hour psychology session from someone whose biggest accomplishment is getting famous for making fun of other people's work. But Kimmel wasn't finished. Standing up as well, he leaned across his desk, pointing directly at Arnold. Amateur hour? At least I'm honest about what I do. I make jokes. I entertain people. I don't pretend to be some kind of Renaissance man who's mastered every field he's touched. You're like a bad method actor who forgot to break character. Arnold's voice rose for the first time, his accent thick with emotion. You want honest? Here's honest. You're a bitter, small man who's spent so long hiding behind jokes that you've forgotten how to have a real conversation. You invited me here under false pretenses, pretending this would be a normal interview, and instead you've spent the entire time trying to humiliate me on national television. The audience was now completely silent, some people looking toward the exits as if they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. The camera crew continued filming, but several producers could be seen frantically whispering to each other in the background, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Kimmel's response was quieter, but somehow more cutting. Humiliate you. Arnold, you're doing that all by yourself. Every time you open your mouth, you prove my point. You're a relic trying desperately to stay relevant, and watching you squirm up there is honestly just sad at this point. Arnold moved closer to the desk, his imposing presence filling the small space between himself and the host. You know what's sad, Jimmy? A grown man who makes his living by bullying his guests. You hide behind your writers, your producers, your audience, but strip all that away and what are you? Just another playground bully who never grew up. Kimmel's face had gone from flushed to pale, but he continued his attack. Bully? I'm just asking the questions that your fans are too polite to ask. Like, when are you going to admit that your best days are behind you? When are you going to stop embarrassing yourself with these pathetic attempts at reinvention? Arnold's hands slammed down on Kimmel's desk with enough force to make the coffee mug jump, and several papers scattered to the floor. My best days? Jimmy, I'm living my best days right now. I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm surrounded by people who actually care about making the world better. Can you say the same? Or are you going to spend the rest of your career hiding behind this desk, taking potshots at people who have the courage to actually live their lives? The sound of Arnold's hands hitting the desk seemed to echo through the studio like a gunshot, and for a moment, complete silence fell over everyone present. Kimmel's eyes widened slightly, perhaps finally realizing that he had pushed too far. But his ego wouldn't let him back down now. Courage? Kimmel's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. You want to talk about courage? It takes courage to sit here every night and call out the phonies, and the has-beens who come on this show thinking they're still relevant. You're just another aging celebrity who can't accept that the world has moved on without you. Arnold straightened up slowly, his full height now towering over the seated host. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. Jimmy, I've faced down real challenges in my life. I've built companies from nothing. I've governed one of the largest states in America. I've overcome obstacles that would crush most people. And you think sitting behind this desk, protected by your security and your lawyers, makes you brave? Kimmel stood up again, trying to match Arnold's presence, but the physical difference between them was stark and uncomfortable to watch. Protected? I don't need protection from you, Arnold. What are you going to do? Throw a tantrum like the oversized child you've always been? This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges you, you resort to intimidation. Tactics. Arnold's laugh was cold and bitter. Intimidation? Jimmy, if I wanted to intimidate you, you'd know it. What I'm doing right now is trying to figure out how someone gets to be your age and still acts like a middle school bully. Did you never learn how to have an adult conversation? Or is cruelty just your default setting? The host's face contorted, with anger and something that might have been embarrassment. Adult conversation? You're the one who started making this personal, the moment you couldn't handle a few tough questions. I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities, and most of them can take a joke without having a complete meltdown on live television. Arnold shook, his head slowly, a look of genuine disgust crossing his features. A joke? Jimmy, nothing you've said tonight has been funny. It's just been mean-spirited and pathetic. You've spent this entire interview trying to tear me down. And for what? To make yourself feel better? To get a viral moment? What exactly did you think you were going to accomplish here? Kimmel's voice rose to match Arnold's intensity. What I'm trying to accomplish is showing people who you really are underneath all the carefully crafted public relations. The real Arnold Schwarzenegger, not the image your publicists have spent decades building. And apparently the real you is just another entitled celebrity who can't handle criticism. Arnold stepped back from the desk, but his posture remained aggressive, his shoulders squared, and his fists clenched at his sides. Entitled? Jimmy, everything I have, I've earned. Every opportunity, every success, every second chance, I've worked for it. You sit here every night making jokes about people's failures and mistakes. But when was the last time you actually risked anything? When was the last time you put yourself on the line for something that mattered? The question hung in the air, unanswered as Kimmel seemed to struggle for a response. Finally, he settled on another attack. Risk? You want to talk about risk? The biggest risk I take is having people like you on my show, knowing that your ego might be too fragile to handle. Actual interview questions instead of the softball nonsense you usually get fed. Arnold's control finally snapped completely. That's it. I'm done with this circus. He turned toward the audience, his voice carrying easily across the studio without any amplification. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not what I came here for tonight. I came here hoping to have a real conversation about real issues, but instead, I've been subjected to a public humiliation session by someone who apparently thinks cruelty passes for comedy. Kimmel moved around his desk, following Arnold as he began to walk toward the stage exit. Oh, so now you're going to play the victim card? The big tough action hero can't handle a little pushback? This is exactly what I'm talking about, Arnold. You can't take criticism, so you run away. Arnold stopped and turned back, his face flushed with anger. Criticism? Jimmy, criticism is constructive. Criticism helps people grow and improve. What you've been doing tonight is just bullying, plain and simple. And I don't need to stand here and take it from someone whose greatest achievement is getting paid to mock his betters. The insult landed like a physical blow, and Kimmel's response came out as almost a shout. My betters? You arrogant piece of work? You think being a washed-up action star makes you better than everyone else? You think your money and your fake environmental activism make you some kind of saint? Arnold was now walking steadily toward the exit, but he called back over his shoulder without breaking stride. I think being a decent human being makes me better than someone who gets his kicks from trying to destroy people on national television. Enjoy your ratings, Jimmy. I hope they're worth your soul. Kimmel followed him several steps, his voice becoming more desperate and shrill. Don't you walk away from me. We're not done here. You don't get to come on my show, insult me, and then just leave when things get uncomfortable. That's not how this works. Arnold paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one final time. His voice carried a note of finality that seemed to echo through the stunned studio. Actually, Jimmy, that's exactly how this works. I don't owe you anything. Not my time, not my respect, and certainly not my dignity. Find someone else to be your punching bag. With that, Arnold Schwarzenegger walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live set, leaving behind a host who was visibly shaking with rage, a stunned studio, audience, and a crew that had just witnessed one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. The cameras kept rolling as Kimmel stood alone on his stage, apparently at a loss for words for perhaps the first time in his career. As the studio lights dimmed and the episode came to an abrupt end, viewers were left with the image of a host who had clearly bitten off more than he could chew, facing the consequences of pushing one of Hollywood's most respected figures too far. The question on everyone's mind was simple. What happens when a bully finally meets someone who refuses to be bullied? That's the story of how Arnold Schwarzenegger got kicked off Jimmy Kimmel's show. But really, it's the story of how Jimmy Kimmel revealed his true character on live television. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible celebrity stories. And drop a comment below. Do you think Arnold was right to walk off, or should he have stayed and continued the fight?